Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Talents Creator Studio Live. This is Jeff Olson. I am your host today. Can't wait to get into today's show with you all. We got a great one set up. A couple quick things for housekeeping here. As always, we're going to be giving away a set of paints, Rembrandt oils, to one lucky winner at the end of the show. To be eligible, you need to reside in Canada or the US and write "I love Rembrandt" in the comments during the live broadcast. We're again coming to you thankful to our wonderful sponsor, Royal Talens North America, and excited to share today's show with you. We have an outstanding artist who's our guest. She studied at the American Academy of Art in Chicago. Her inspirations include Anders Zorn, Joaquin Sorolla, Jean Singer Sargent, and contemporary masters including Richard Schmid and Nancy Guzik. She continues to garner accolades and awards, including in 2019 Oil Painters of America National Show Gold Medal winner. I remember I was there. That was so exciting. She has been included in many notable publications, including Art of the West, Southwest Art, International Artist, Art Talk, and The Artist magazine. She exhibits and teaches internationally and is a sought-after speaker and instructor. Everybody join me in welcoming Royal Talents Ambassador, Susan Lyon. Susan, how's it going?
Hello. Hello, everybody. Just happened to pop in just at the right time, Jeff.
That was perfect timing. Perfect timing. I love it. I love it. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, exciting. Oh, I love it. It's so fun to hopefully meet all the people who follow Royal Talens and Rembrandt. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're excited to be at today's show. I'm already seeing lots of people saying hi and checking in, so that's fantastic. Hello, everybody. Great to see you here on YouTube. One quick reminder, don't forget to like and share and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this content. We also have all of Royal Talens International content available on the station too. So lots of great resources for artists. So you check it out. Today we've got a great demo that Susan has prepared, but before we get to that, we're going to have a few questions, a little interview, and then Susan sent me some images of her work that we're going to go through so we can talk about those as well. So my first question, as always, is where are you at today?
so I live in North Carolina. I live north of Winston-Salem, which is very close to the Blue Ridge Parkway. So if anyone looks on a map, we're kind of towards Virginia.
Very beautiful, I bet. How long have you been there?
Gosh, for a long time, almost embarrassingly long. We moved here really soon after we left, 96. We've been here since 96.
That's a
I mean,
long time. Now,
almost 30 years. Holy cow.
don't say it out loud.
I know. I mean, I've been here longer than I was where I grew up. So isn't that's always that weird time when you're like been in your place longer than like your childhood,
Yes.
place.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, are you guys from that area originally, or did you guys select North Carolina for any particular reason?
We are from pretty much what you might call like the suburbs of Chicago. So, very close to Chicago. And so yeah, I mean, I always say we're from Chicago, even though I grew up in Oak
Yeah,
Park and my husband
yeah,
Scott
yeah.
Burdick grew up in Elmwood Park. So we're these tiny little suburbs. And we both went to the same school, which was the American Academy of Art. It was an illustration school. And it was like an associate's degree, so you didn't have to learn books. You didn't have to know how to read. So, but yeah, I went right after him. So,
Yeah.
he went to school. I feel like a hair. He went to school with Nancy Guzik, and so that's how he met her. And
Oh.
they were like really good friends in school. And so, when I started going to school, that's who I heard about all the time was
Mhm.
Scott Burdick and Nancy Guzik and Richard Schmid and all these artists who
For
were
sure.
like making a living and doing the dream because it doesn't seem like, in all honesty, like how do you even be an artist, right? And so Richard was like this great mentor to them because he had, been making a living as a self-employed artist. So he was sort of like mentored a handful of these wonderful young artists from the school.
He was an incredible mentor, wasn't he? He's had such an influence on our
Yeah,
community of artists.
totally. I mean, I just feel like he really did. I say this a lot, but he did change the way I think we see contemporary realism. He's sort of that bridge between that sort of classical kind of work from hundreds of years ago to like changing it and making it a little bit more modern, but yet still, understanding how to draw, understanding light and color theory, but like just making it so beautiful and like almost more beautiful. So that like in a way, like more beautiful than what you were looking at. Like he bumped it up a notch, like just simple, still life or a model sitting there. He just made it where I don't know. I don't even have words for it. And so that's what Scott always says is that art you shouldn't have to explain it because it's such a visual art that, if it does something to you and you just keep wanting to look at it, well, then that's all that matters, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really fantastic inspiration for sure. Speaking of inspirations, in your bio, you said something I thought was really fun that your early interest in art was sparked by a PBS show on Georgia O'Keeffe. Do you recall what it
Oh,
was,
yeah.
that show that inspired you?
Yeah, because a lot of people ask where they assume artists were artists all their lives. Like Scott, he loved to draw all his life, and I wasn't like that. And it never occurred to me to be an artist until I think it was the ending of junior year in high school, and I saw this PBS program on Georgia O'Keeffe, and I just remember thinking, I liked her. I mean, her paintings are very beautiful, and of course, she was so unique, and but it wasn't her art so much. I mean, it was interesting, but it was her life. It was the fact that she was so independent, that she was so, I don't know, strong-willed, that she seemed to just have this uniqueness about her. And I think I was just, as any young person, I don't know, I was craving that, striving towards something. And so I just remember vividly seeing that show and it changing me, like literally changing my brain chemistry. So even though I didn't believe I was going to be an artist or anything like that, I think, I had asked my dad, I was like, I had heard, and this is before the internet. How did I even know about this stuff? I mean, I don't know. Did I don't know. How did we even, can you even remember how did we learn about things before the internet? Was it in a newspaper? Did I look up in the telephone book? I have no memory of how I knew or learned about the fact that the Art Institute of Chicago had a high school weekend, like Saturday classes, right? And so I just remember asking my dad the summer before senior year, I was like, oh, I'd like to take those classes. And we lived close enough, I could literally just hop on the train and go downtown. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I didn't learn anything from those because the Art Institute by then had been very, very experimental,
Hmm.
abstract. They weren't teaching you like how to actually draw. It was almost like babysitting. But the thing that was so exciting about it was I felt like a grown-up. I got to go downtown and the school was attached to the very back of the museum. So being a senior, a high school student on Saturdays, you could go into the museum for free. You could just wander around the back and it seemed like a movie. Like you felt like you were like this Avenger, like just the excitement of growing up and like just thinking how exciting a life like this would be. But I literally did not know how to draw. I was not good artist. And the only reason why I even went to art school was because I was not a good student. I mean, I probably barely graduated high school. It's almost embarrassing. I mean, really. In fact, Scott and I are so different. Scott is like the guy who likes to book, he can teach himself anything.
Yeah.
He can just look at instructions and like learn something. He's very much the guy who probably didn't have to study for tests and just aced everything and could have gone to a really good school but wanted to be an artist. And I was the kid who just, I don't know, like I just was like flailing. I did not know what I wanted to be. And my dad knew a teacher. I'm a talker, Jeff, so you're just gonna have to bear with me.
Making
Um,
my job easy here,
oh
Susan.
no, I just am. I'm a talker. So my dad knew a teacher at the American Academy. So the American Academy was since it was like this associate's technical school, every teacher there had to be a professional. They had to actually be an illustrator and teach illustration. They had to be a photographer and teach it. And they had to, be what they were because the teachers only came in 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So the other days they'd be doing their job.
Right.
And my dad knew an advertising guy. And I mean, who would even know about this school? It was just so small. And he just came home one day and he said he signed me up. And I was like, I don't know how to draw. I mean, I'm not an artist. And it was so shocking to my system. Um, I was like, oh, I mean, I guess maybe I'll be like a keyline paste up person, or I'll go into something that didn't need talent. But um, so it's really all a fluke why I even went to art school. So okay, there you go.
Super interesting. And well, I love what you said about the Art Institute, the museum. I lived in Chicago for a couple years, and it's got to be
Okay.
one of my favorite museums.
Yeah.
And what a privilege to be able to go through there like that. It is such a wonderful space and inspiring. And I know what you mean about the magic that happens when you're walking through places like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, super cool, super cool.
Well, I couldn't have gone to the Art Institute because I didn't have the grades. You know, to go to the Art Institute, it was the type of school that had to do like math and science and history and all that stuff. So I wouldn't have even gotten in it.
Yeah, it's still an elite school. I think it's
Yeah.
one of the best in the country for sure. Um, but it is interesting your comment on the teaching method and how it's so different than academic training for art. There are good things and bad things, so I'm not
Yeah.
it's not judging it, but it is just a different experience completely. Yeah, yeah. Another question about your passions and inspiration. You talked in your bio, and we've talked about this before too, how drawing is one of your greatest passions. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. No, I feel like I didn't used to like drawing, so when I was in school I didn't like it. It's so funny how it's taken me decades to figure out who I am, what I like, and even what my unique fingerprint is, you know. And it took me forever to like know that I was a mass person. So what I mean by that is that most of the time, when you start off drawing, you start off with a pencil and you start off with line and sketching. And I tried that when I first thought, I'm going to go to art school. I'm going to try it. And I hated it. It was just, I still don't like it. Like I'm still someone that if you give me a pencil and I try and sketch, I'll inevitably want to smudge, and kind of mass in. And it never was easy for me. So it's like that's the thing. Like there's not one way of being an artist, right? And but when there was, and as an artist too, I can never do one thing for too long. And but I'll go through long periods of like say 2 years even, where all I'm doing, I'm focusing on drawing, meaning dry medium. Sometimes it's pastel, charcoal, sometimes it's mixed, sometimes I'll even do like wash and pastel, but it's works on paper. And then I'll like take a break and I'll just do portraits, oil portraits for a year. And then like right now I'm in a mood where I just want to do still lifes and flowers because I was working from photos for so long that now I just maybe spring and I want to use all your fun, juicy colors and I don't even really want to mix, which is what I'm going to talk about today a little bit because when you work with portraits so much, a lot of the times it is. Oh my gosh, I get this question so much that honestly, how do you make a perfect flesh? How do you make a perfect this? I don't understand light. I don't understand warm and cool. I don't understand what my shadow color should be. And I'm like, well, neither do I. I don't know either. And it's all relative because of the light source. Like I have a warm lamp to the right of me and I have a cooler light up here. And so it depends on the light source between what colors you mix. But over time, I totally started to realize that it doesn't have anything to do with for the perfect flesh tones because most of my favorite paintings are all very, very simple and neutral. And you can choose whatever you want. If you choose lots of blues and grays and purples, then the person just looks like they're under the moonlit. If you use lots of like yellows, oranges, reds, they might look like they're sunlit. So it has nothing to do with like perfect. But with still lifes and flowers and vegetables and all these things that you can paint that are alive, then you get to use all these colors that I might have been too scared to use with a portrait. Like Scott will use them, but for me, like I was always sort of being very limited. Like when I would do portraits, it was a lot of neutrals or browns and blues, a lot of just warm and cool, a lot of just lots of different browns. But like now I get to use every single purple. I get to use like every single yellow, every single orange, every single green. And I'm kind of excited about like even not mixing, meaning like take your like cool purple and your warm purple and just paint them right out of the tube. Like literally. And just have those like almost like convenience and just work on those next to each other instead of, with portraits or other types of paintings, you'd be mixing a lot. You'd be trying to mix that purple with a black and a red, or you'd be trying to mix that, greens with oranges and blues. And that's great. But now I'm like, no, I'm sick of mixing. Like I literally just want to put a color down and then another color next to it and then another color on top of it and use the transparency of these colors. Um, I don't know. So that's kind of what I'm excited about right now is just painting onions until I get sick of them and painting flowers until I get sick of them, and they allow me to like just
Yeah.
buy all those fun colors that you guys have.
Well, this is a great segue because I've got some images.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about color and we're talking about the drawing. Let's go ahead and look at the paintings that you sent me, which are wonderful. Everybody
Yeah,
bear
these
with
are all
me.
pretty recent.
There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So this is a 12 by 9 inch, and this is kind of, hey, it's very traditional. It is a little kind of blue-green vase with some flowers I bought from Walmart and a brown background. And so when you start off with still life, sometimes, I know for me, like I would get way too ambitious. I mean, I would just make my too many things, too much going on. And of course, just putting some flowers in a vase. And recently, what I've been trying to do too is obviously, I guess, go in some kind of harmony lane, meaning like this was just a variety of greens and blues, meaning the yellow greens of the leaves, the kind of bluish green of the vase, and the more, kind of turquoisey sea green of the cloth on the bottom, and then just a boring neutral brown. And playing with those and not trying to be what you might call literal. We can guess at what these flowers are, but they're not, nothing is so descriptive that I spent a lot of time or showed multiple petals. And I've been trying to go into these paintings thinking like, okay, what does it feel like to do a demo? What is it? And so in my own studio, what does it feel like? Now, will it just take an afternoon or will it take an afternoon and then maybe an hour the next day? But a lot of it is like, okay, how do I use the biggest brush? How do I use literally the purest color? Like that green, like right out of the tube, that pink right out of the tube, just a brown right out of the tube. Even that turquoise or even that blue green of the vase is just like right out of the tube. And so I'm trying to kind of do that instead of neutralizing everything so much. And so, yeah, this is what kind of this was I was trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and I can see the transparency coming through in the vase you just talked about that, and it's beautiful, that kind of green undertone to it, and really lovely.
Thanks.
Are these the onions that you're
Yeah,
putting through their
these are
paces?
actually yellow onions, right? So also, since I used to do still lifes a long time ago, and then I focused on portraits for so long, and then trying to get back into still lifes, I had to make sure that I didn't overthink it, and that I didn't spend too long on it, and that I could paint objects that didn't really have a lot of what you call drawing, and these are all just round. They are all versions of round. White onions, yellow onions, green apples, red apples. And, it's just the idea of painting like a sphere, So everything will have a slightly shadow side and everything will have a slightly light side. And how can I block it in with like just the simplest way? And so this is just me kind of literally throwing down some stuff on a table and not worrying. And sometimes, just putting things on a table and then like making your own, making your own design, cutting it in. So you would probably have more onions, maybe more things happening, and then you would zero in. And then I've just been using a lot of like scrap canvas that I have. Sometimes they're
Mhm.
really odd sizes. And I just love like, I mean, being able to use that sort of lemony, citrusy, vibrant greens, and then using like peaches and these violets like right out of the tube. So, these violets that you see on the like halftones of the onions and stuff are just like right out of the tube. And that's kind of what I'm trying to think of is that not just taking a color and to lighten it or darken it, adding white or adding black, but literally taking these sort of brilliant, sort of saturated. So even in the highlights of the onions, you see like this sort of green, you see this violet, you
Yeah.
see these like colors instead of, and that's the thing about highlights is that highlights have color. And especially when you're trying to paint something that's alive, you want to show color more than you just want to show value. So, and also, I think when I'm doing still lifes, for me, it's not the number one thing to have contrast. With portraits, sometimes I'd love that, but
Right.
with like flowers and like these still lifes, I want to see more color instead of more drama. So that's why it's fun to sort of just be more simple. And when I'm blocking in these apples, I'm literally taking like the cadmium red out of the tube and just massing in the whole thing, or this sort of lemony yellow green, and just massing in the whole thing, hinting at a shadow,
Mm.
hinting at a halftone, putting a little highlight and an accent. And so it can become a game, right? A game of like, what's the least amount of strokes per apple or per onion that you can make? And maybe the focal point onion or apple will have a few more strokes, but then the ones that are in the periphery will have, the block in stage. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do is keeping a lot of my block in still there. And then um, only narrowing in on like where I really want the viewer to look.
I love that sense of economy. Uh,
I'm trying, and it's hard to do with portrait because portraits can look really left on, I mean, it's such a mastery when someone can leave a portrait at such a stage.
mhm.
But sometimes you might, they look too much like a demo. But with an apple or an onion, the dance of the strokes can be so much more exciting and more fun than, I mean, nobody wants a completely rendered onion. I mean, I'm just going to say it. Nobody wants that, right? It's just too boring. So how do you get that? You
Yeah.
time yourself, you use your big brush, you think in like like you said, great, editing, economy. Like don't show every little stroke. Don't show every little thing of paper coming off the onion. Don't show every little, transition. It's about only showing the biggest form. And, you can think of it as sort of like a game.
Yeah. Yeah. Your brain puts a lot of that together and kind of letting that happen. I like that. And I love the complementary colors here too, the
Yeah,
green,
it's sort of like
red.
a pink and green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really nice.
Now, this is totally what I was talking about before. Now, I did this from life and I did touch it up a little bit afterwards. Like, usually for me, I would do the jewelry and any sort of like maybe a few strokes at home, but I tend to like to keep my paintings that I do from life portraits as hopefully looking like that. I don't want to take it home and then turn it into something that it's not. So to me, this is a completely what you might call monotone, meaning it is really just a painting of brown. I think this was some sort of like red brown, it wasn't even transparent oxide brown, which I use a lot. It was maybe a little bit more of a version. And sometimes I'll use like a burnt sienna. Um, and so it was just a painting of brown. And then I used your wonderful cold gray, which
Yeah.
I know I did a video with you a few years ago talking about like cold gray
Hmm.
and warm gray. And when you guys came out with those, I was like, hallelujah. It's a convenience color, right? I mean, we could make these, but just to have it come right out of the tube is just, It's so nice. And I use those grays all the time. But this would be an example of what I was talking about with portrait. It's very neutral. It's not crazy. It's all about just the subtlety of brushwork and trying to get the drawing right while you're painting. So I wasn't pushing color in any way. And this is small. I'm going to say this is a 12-inch by 9-inch.
No, I love it. And your use of the large brush is really fun in this. I like that. And the suggestions of things like the necklace and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
fun.
This is one that I started from life, and the same thing I tweaked when I went home, but it's definitely wanting to try and keep it looking as, I guess from life as possible. Very similar too. I mean, I added those violets in the background. Kind of like sometimes people ask me, like, what do you do with a background? And sometimes I talk about this idea of having it be a vignette. So I had toned this board. Now I'm really loving these ampersand boards,
Hmm.
all the different kind. I mean, this was a cradle board that was brown, and then I put this sort of gray kind of gesso on it. So it was like that dried when I painted on it. And but I love all their boards. I've been really into them recently. And so I knew that I could leave a lot of this board simple. I didn't have to paint all the way out to the edges. And sometimes when I'm trying to explain to people about an anchor, so this is what I would call a vignette. Kind of like the last one, but this one's even more, meaning I didn't even put more. So we have sort of a lead-in of like her collar, very suggestive, not overly explained. So the lead-in from the bottom kind of leads you up to her face. And then there's another shape that kind of grabs on the top. Now, if I didn't have that shape going from her hair to the very top, she would look like she's floating. And those are things that everyone's going to be a little bit different on how they do it.
Yeah.
But it's something to think about is that a lot of times people will have a portrait or something be very bottom heavy, meaning they'll have the head and then they'll paint the shirt all the way down to the bottom, but then there'll be nothing behind the head. And so there's all this space. And that's where, as an artist, it's up to you to design it. Like, does it need to have something almost attached to the side? Does it need to have something attached to the top to kind of lead you off the canvas? Now, it's really just, this sort of color because it's not a dark value, but it's just sort of leading you off there without, I guess, maybe too much contrast in the background. Um, and those are things that are hard to, what you might call teach,
Hmm.
because I've just seen other artists do it. I mean, like I saw Richard Schmid do it, and I saw my husband Scott do it, and I would see other artists, especially like people like Nikolai Feshin too, how he would design backgrounds with these sort of abstract strokes that would just allow the portrait to kind of feel weighted and not floating. And you practice multiple different ways, and somehow, it will come to you. It will.
I love that color. That violet is
I know,
beautiful.
I can't remember what it's right out of the tube though, pretty much, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do also. But this is pretty much a brown painting. I mean, it really is. It's
Yeah. The
it's
hair's alive. I love the hair.
Yeah, the hair is like a little bit more of a red brown, so it could
Yeah.
be like a burnt sienna or sometimes a terra rosa, depending on
Right.
but then it's just a neutral brown, and I'm sure I used transparent oxide brown on this.
Yeah.
And then for the highlights in the face, like the little pink, it's really probably just that violet or that cool pink with
Mhm.
a little bit of white and transparent oxide brown, and it just allows, instead of just being white by itself, it adds a little bit of color to that highlight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the echo of that violet in the background and the headband and in the collar of her shirt. They're different colors, but they're kind of bouncing back and forth. They're really wonderful the way they work together.
Thank you. This was done from a photo. Scott and I went to China. I don't know if this was China or Tibet. This could be Tibet, years and years ago. And this is a 16 by 12. And so a lot of times when we paint people like in these sort of market scenes or outdoors, instead of what I use that word all the time being literal, it's an impression. Like, of course, these are sort of abstract shapes. You can see that the ground is maybe a little bit more information, like you can tell there's a light source, you can tell that there's a cast shadow. So they're grounded, they're tethered to the bottom of the canvas, but then everything behind them. And the only way that I would try, and I think we're going to look at another piece where you do abstraction behind a model, is be careful to not have contrast. So as we go from the middle of the canvas up, and I want to show distance, nothing is too bright. Nothing is, you don't want extreme blacks, you don't want extreme lights, because you don't want anything in the background to feel like it's competing with the foreground. So the foreground should have the most color, the most detail, the most
Right.
sharpness, and then everything behind you, you can be abstract and you can be colorful. It just, you can tell that all the information behind the figures are darker, right? They're more middle. There's not those strong reds. There's not that strong yellows. It's because I needed everything behind her to stay back there. But doing abstract backgrounds, it's a lot of trial and error. And you put in, you take out, you overpaint, you scrape down, you dry brush. Um, you wish you could do it all in one take, but yeah, so you still see a little bit of transparency, but a lot of it was trying to get that balance correctly. And yeah, and it took me a little bit of time.
Well, it's kind of how we see. I mean, when we are
Yeah,
focused in on something
exactly.
like this, it's somebody walking through a marketplace, the background becomes a blur.
Hmm.
You're kind of focused on the person walking, so it works really well. And I love the techniques you're using in the background. I love the scratching out. It looks like there at the top, and the direction. There's lots of variety and direction in brush strokes. That's really fun.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's kind of what we hope is to have a variety in stroke size, like big, medium,
Hmm.
small, a variety of transparent, thin, and thick. And, it's like I wish I knew the right proportion, but it is kind of like you're always trying to get that a little bit. Like I personally do like seeing transparency in my painting. Now, usually those are in shadow areas.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so it's like I know that a lot of times if I get too thick and too opaque everywhere, I tend to feel like then it's a little bit heavy. So I like to have a little bit of that sort of see-through, and I call it air. It's giving air to the scene.
That's a nice way to put it. I like that.
So this is, yeah, very similar. It's just a much bigger painting. So that last one was a 16 by 12, and this one is a 40 by 30. And, but the same idea, like I kind of repainted that background a few times. And of course, this mother and child was in a market scene. She was outside. And I even really, and all my paintings too, I tend to, even though, it's not extreme color, I do push the color harmonies. So I mean, it wasn't as blue, right? She wasn't as purple in real life.
Right.
But yet I wanted to do those purples and blue harmony. So even in Photoshop, I will work on every photo. I will tweak it. I will push and pull. I will actually add colors. I will saturate certain things and I will desaturate certain things. I will literally make the backgrounds out of focus, blurry, whatever, just so that I'm not constantly fighting that tendency to paint
Hmm.
what's in front of me. But this background was one of those that definitely like how much to put in and take out. And that light that was behind her head, for a
Hmm.
long time, I had too bright. So these are, a lot of it is overpainting and then kind of pushing it back, because in the photos, sometimes there is some incredibly strong light for whatever reason, reflections or whatever the object is, and it does seem as bright as on the figures. But us as artists, we have to change that. We
Yeah.
have to. We have to like tell people because we're trying to make a scene and we're doing the illusion of of distance, of light, of proportion, of all these things. It's an illusion. So we can't always take what the image is giving us. And that, believe me, I'm still trying to figure out how not to be like just paint what's in front of me, like, a dummy. I have to like a lot of times over time, like get myself out of that hypnotic, just going, well, it's there, so I put it down. But this is a lot of overpainting in the background. Yeah, it's just, an abstract background. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's just all about design.
Yeah. But there are beautiful things in it. I love the green highlights and the way they play off the all that red.
Yeah, I mean, I needed it, or
Yeah.
I did need a little bit of that green, because the red of her cape is so solid. I mean, she actually had designs on that, but I've never been good at designs. So some people love to paint designs, and I think it's so amazing when they do it. But for me, I tend to actually delete design because I just, either it's not my personality type or whatever, but because it was such a solid red, I needed to break it up with some like opposite.
Yeah, yeah, and the little green flecks in the jewelry and the necklace and stuff, it all kind of connects it in a beautiful way. I also really like how so much of this background area here is dark, but right
Mhm.
around her face, you brought it uh, up a little bit, and it really creates a glow and an aura. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, that really, we all want to look at the baby, but in general, it's her face that is the center of interest.
Right,
So
that's
I
powerful.
had to push that edge. I had to make that background just a little bit darker right there. Um, because yeah, it would be tempting. A lot of times what I think is people might make more contrast in the jewelry, more contrast in her clothes, but that's not the center of interest to me. So I had to de-emphasize any of the strong darks around her jewelry and the fabric. And I had to like make that sort of middle and push the strong contrast near her forehead and her nose.
Yeah, yeah, no, wonderful. And I think, yeah, that's the last one.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those. Those were fantastic.
Oh, good. Well,
So I'm
gosh,
excited for your demo
yes.
now.
Oh no. Okay, the demo is so simple. So I hope everybody just understands that it's
Some great tips, though. I think
I'm
there's going to
gonna
be some wonderful
downplay it.
takeaways. Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna get some tea. I'm gonna downplay the demo.
perfect. And
So I'm gonna
I will
just
be
change
able to look
camera.
at the Q&A now, folks. So I'm going to start previewing the questions. There we go. That looks great.
Changing. Okay. So I guess we want to make sure, Jeff, you can hear me over here, right?
I can.
Okay, good. I'm always having to ask. Um, okay, so Scott, where are you? What's happening?
We are ready.
Okay, well, I need you to move the camera. I need you to be on my face. Okay. Because one thing I wanted to talk about is, like I was just mentioning before, is I mean, just have fun with buying some of these colors that maybe you've never bought before. So I was telling Jeff, like one of the colors that I hadn't really used until I kind of started, maybe still lifes recently is this permanent red violet. Now, I've used a lot of the permanent matter mediums a lot, and I've used some other different cool reds, and we've been using quinacridone rose for a long time. So, I was just, oh, okay. So the thing that I really, oh, is that recording?
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing that I really wanted to mention is a lot of times, instead of what I was saying about mixing, is just use these colors right out of the tube. Meaning, and I'm going to do is like a simple demo about it, but so this is just a little onion painting that I did. And so taking some of these cool reds and just massing in with paint without mixing, and then only on top doing these sort of colorful highlights and making, to be honest, making the highlights as saturated, as colorful, not just adding white, meaning you have to add a color. So that blue next to that red, which is so saturated. And in fact, so this was a still life that I did very similar to that other, to any of these ones that I've been doing, where I just put stuff down. I don't art direct. I'm kind of just trying to practice paint, leaving a lot of these exterior onions very, very black-ish, and then just only focusing on, kind of what's down here. And I worked on it for, gosh, trying to think of it as a demo, meaning big brush, simple, not over worried about, drawing, just trying to like get different sized onions. And so this is dry now, but like say I really wanted to have some really juicy highlights here. I waited to put more highlights on them now when they're dry. Because when this paint was really, really wet, if you put down a stroke and then you put down another stroke and it's been wet, first of all, those paint can easily mix together depending on how heavy the stroke is. But like say I don't like it. Oh my gosh, then you have to wipe everything down and mix that blue again and mix the pink again and mix this again. So I do wait until it's completely dry so that now I can go back in. And also I've taken down that still life. I don't even have that. I'm not even looking at that still life anymore. So a lot of times what Scott and I have been doing recently is you get a painting to a certain stage and then you stop looking at the reference. So even with portraits, even with paintings that were like that Tibetan one of the grandmother and the child, you get to a point where you just stop looking at the reference and you're only painting it to be a design of what you want it to look like. So, just like that green in the background of that Maasai painting. I mean, there was no green back there. So now when I go back into this painting, I know that this highlight was even brighter. So I'm going to be mixing. So I had a blue and then I had this sort of violet. Well, on top of that, I might even mix a viridian, with maybe the hint of a cool pink and put that on top of that. So, but I will see the blue, the pink, and the viridian with the white right next to each other. And the view, it will vibrate so much, but each brushstroke has a strong saturated color. And I just wanted you guys to understand that it's not all just done in one time. I do wait for some of this to dry completely so that I can put different dry strokes down. And if they're not perfect, meaning I'm trying to be economical, and if I put down like a beautiful, like maybe red highlight right, on the halftone, oh, but maybe I went too light. Okay, I can just literally wipe it down because I only want one stroke. Or like maybe I want like a beautiful yellow green down here and I only want one stroke. I wait till sometimes I do these things when they're dry. And then I look at this painting from across the room and I just might go in and might put a little saturated yellow green on that edge. I might put, a stronger orange on this edge right here. And I'll put those little bitty bits of jewel strokes. They're jewels. They're just highly saturated
We
little.
lost your video, Susan.
I'm sorry, what?
We lost the video for
Oh,
a second there.
Scott,
This guy?
yeah. Sorry, our cord went out.
Oh, no worries.
I think the cord is all right.
No, Scott, it's not.
I knew I wasn't imagining because it says no video.
No, it's our cord. Scott, you're gonna have to.
Did it come back on? I'm pushing
No, it
it as
didn't.
hard as I can.
You have to take it out.
Not yet. There we go. There we go. We're
Yeah,
back.
I'm so sorry. It's
No, it's okay.
we have this cord that honestly keeps wanting to like bend out and we've taped it. But if he's moving the camera at all, so you just let us know.
Okay, I will. I will.
Thanks.
I'm loving this painting though. I'm loving this painting you're showing.
Well, yeah, so it's kind of like the idea of painting right out of the tube, using a biggest brush, allowing everything to be out of focus, zeroing in, and being able, the great thing about onions, and the reason why I've been so excited about painting onions, maybe more than like an apple or something, is because of the ability to be very abstract with these strokes and allowing to like have like a very saturated color and then another saturated and then another one. And it's like this pile-on, which kind of is perfect for onions, right? I think that's why I've been kind of into it, but I just wanted to show it because I've been using that sort of purple recently.
Yeah,
And
the color's amazing, but I do love how you made the background all blurry and the intensity of the
yes,
of it. It just
yeah,
makes it so much more three-dimensional.
thank you. And this is just like a little, I wanted to show you, Scott used your color last week. And of course, let me come on. Scott's painting is so different than mine. And it's so almost like I could literally sandpaper my fingernails on this painting. But I wanted to show you that, he's been using these colors, and when you're painting flowers, just the vibrancy of these purples, and that's kind of the fun thing about getting these colors right out of the tube also. So let me put this back, this here. And so when I really thought about the demo I wanted to do today, I was like, well, I don't have that much time. And it's a pretty primitive demo. But Scott, I don't know if you could pan down and just show the onion. I mean, I literally, it's just this purple onion on this counter. I just put this blue back there just to have a color behind the onion at the top. Very simple, soft spotlight that is literally just coming from my light on the ceiling. Now, okay, now obviously, when you look at this, it's pretty bold and it's pretty primitive. Now, the demo that I wanted to talk about today was using a cool and a warm very, very close next to each other. So you sometimes you have to be able, because when it's right out of the tube, you do not see the temperature or the intensity of the color until you kind of thin it out. And that's what's so great about working on white when you're using these transparent colors. Because if I had worked on a toned paper, and of course the tone would influence it. So a lot of times when I'm working on these onions or I'm working on flowers, I'm choosing, which I don't always do with portrait, but I'm choosing to work on white because I love that intensity of this sort of stained glass look that, you have that white vibrating through, but you can see this is a little bit bluer. You can see this is a little bit warmer. And then of course, when you add white to it, there is this, it's a little bit cooler and a little bit warmer. And then I just have some of that cool gray and a tiniest bit of ultramarine blue and then titanium white. Now, so the demo is how do you use warm and cool on top of each other, but also I was playing around with, how do paints be affected by the different brushes that you use. So this is like a synthetic, right? So long hair, just smooth. And then this is just a simple, bristle. And Scott, if you can kind of do a little close up. So I pretty much just blocked in each of these in like 5 minutes. So they're primitive. But if you can see how just using a synthetic brush, it's just a little bit more of what you might call a satin finish, right? A smoother finish. And even using it with this paint, and I'll show you, is a little bit different. But then using a bristle brush is a little bit more rustic. So I mean, I'm going to say that, but I like both. There is not one way, but for you as an artist, I want you to actually test it out yourself. You need to know what a bristle brush does and what a synthetic brush does. And you need to know what it's going to look like when you use both with these type of very vibrant paints. And then I just sort of overemphasize like the blue and then the warm and then the blue on top. So that's always how I make these highlights. I put a saturated kind of, because there's like cool, there's the cool light on this onion from this like bluish light. So you have the blue, and then you have the warm, and then you have the blue on top. So it's like a cake. Well, okay. So what I wanted to show you was, I'm just first going to do it with this synthetic, right? So I'm going to clean it out, and I'm just going to take this, what's this called again? This is permanent red violet. I'm so in love with this color right now. So you see how I don't even really have mineral spirits. I just kind of dipped my paint in mineral spirits and then wiped it out. So it has the most minimal amount of mineral spirits, and I'm not using any medium today. But you see how like kind of, because this is a synthetic brush, you see how kind of wet it goes. So I'm just going to I just want you to see how beautiful this is when you use these synthetic brushes. See how it's kind of like, it just looks so luscious You can still scumble and you can still get it light. But I mean, look, so first
We
of all,
lost the video again, guys.
oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm looking up you guys on those colors. I'm going to post a link to the
Oh,
Rembrandt
okay, good.
site for folks. There we
Yeah.
go. We're back.
I know. Scott, do you need some more tape? We're like the Flintstones. Tape on camera.
And I'll take this a little bit.
To tape it. Okay. So I just wanted to show that you can scumble with these synthetic brushes. So first of all, you might just do this to fill in, and I wouldn't even draw this onion. I would literally paint past the edges, right? And then you take the synthetic brush, which is kind of nice. You just might go on the darker part. You might just kind of go like this. You might go like this. So with the same brush, you can have sort of a scumble, and you can have like this sort of very solid, very kind of licked, very simple kind of look to it, right? So that is one way of kind of scumbling in. And like I said, I've been choosing these objects that are just round. So I fill in the whole thing with just one color out of the two, but with the same color, without adding anything, just the pressure of putting it down and pressing, or like just even being a little bit thicker out of the two, you can create that without like graying it down and stuff. So anyway, so that's just a very basic way, and that's the cool thing about synthetic, is that you do get that. I got a little ickiness in there. You do get this sort of glossy. So that's a good term. So shiny and glossy. Now I'm going to try it with a bristle. So with a bristle, it's just a little bit different feeling, but I love blocking with bristle. So I'm going to take a bristle with the same paint, and I'm going to scumble. So it's just a little bit different feeling. You get a little bit more broken edge. It's this is how I fill in a lot with my paint. They also notice how I'm holding my brush. I'm always kind of holding my brush like this instead of like this. So it's so I can maneuver through my shoulder more. So you see how I can scumble, but there's a little bit scratchier. And there's not one, in fact, the best onion will probably have a little bit of scratchy and smooth all in the same thing. But you see how I'm kind of doing this. And now let's see what it looks like when I take just more paint and I just kind of go like this. You're going to see more, I'm stuck in my paint. You see how you see the ridges. So it's going to create a more rugged textural kind of expression, whereas the synthetic is much more of a velvety, shiny satin feel. And so not one is good or bad. It's not one or good or bad, but I do like blocking in my paintings, especially my still lifes, with like this bristle, so that I have that underneath scratchiness. And then just maybe in a few places, you might smooth down with like a synthetic, just to create that little bit of both scratchy and smooth. So not one, right or wrong. Now, since I wouldn't be drawing the onion, I'm going to show you a little bit about like how I would paint flowers or all these onions. Is I would paint through them. Then I would carve, so that I'm not just painting up to a line. Now, you can do it either way too. You can like use synthetic or bristle. Now the synthetic, you're going to be able to get a sharper edge. It's just the nature of the bristle. And with obviously, with a more rough brush, you're just not going to get it, but that's okay. That's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of that cool gray with some ultramarine blue. And then what I would do is I would just sort of like carve in the background. So now, because I have some of that red past that line, that creates interest. It's not just the separation of blue and then red. Because you're carving back, then you just get that little bit that you can now kind of like push through. And it's just that you need balance in all parts of your painting. You just don't want to have like just solid blue next to solid red. You want to have a little bit of both. and I do angles. I don't just like do a circle. I think about angles, right? And I haven't used any mineral spirits. So this synthetic brush pushes the paint pretty easily. I feel also that the less amount of medium or the less amount of Gamsol that you use, you're able to manipulate the paint better. So let me take, before I go any further, I'm gonna need to always do your darks and your shadows first. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that cool gray, and I'm going to just make a little bit of a shadow because I want my shadows to be as thin. I don't want my shadow under this onion to be heavy. You know, I want air. So I'm scumbling a little bit. And you see, because my bristle, I mean, this isn't bristle, my synthetic is kind of splayed. For some reason, people don't like that. Oh my God. I think you want to have brand new brushes, and you want to have some of these brushes that have character, because it creates then this sort of tooth action.
Kind of abstract.
Yeah, it creates an abstract so that things aren't just so hard edged on all sides, that you do get, I mean, so I love having brand new brushes, teenage brushes, and old age brushes. Okay, so I just wanted to show that before we went
I
too
love
far.
that too. I love the texture,
Yes.
you get the personality. You can't make that up. It's got to happen
Right,
with
because
the.
if you get too solid, then you come back, you find yourself coming back with like a palette knife or scraping down, and it's like sometimes, just figure out, try to work in different types of brushes. So now I was saying I had to put that shadow in. If I had painted the light of the fabric all the way up to this onion, and then I painted that shadow, I mean, of course, that would mix in together. So anyway, so just saying that, like, the idea of this was painting all the way through the onion, then carving the background so that you can like get a sharp edge when you want, and you can get a soft edge when you want, just because you like either a softer touch or by mixing what's on both sides. So those are just things to think about, is get your more saturated color down, then get your shadows, and then carve in the background. And this is just an interesting way of thinking about doing flowers also. Okay. So the thing that I want to do now is, because it's gonna be pretty quick, so I want to show you how I would mix up some saturated, like these like highlights and stuff. All right. Okay. I like to take my biggest brush, because when you saw those other onions, instead of taking a little brush and going deep, 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 remember, I want big shape, and then hopefully middle shape, and then my smaller shapes. And I might, depending on the brush, sometimes you can use the same brush, but a lot of times I'll use my biggest brush, and then I'll move down to a middle-sized brush. So I'm just kind of taking out some of this red a little bit. And I'm also making sure that I don't have a lot of moisture, right? Because if I'm wanting to put down some of these strokes and leave them and not like either run or blend in too much, you kind of have to have a pretty dry brush, right? You don't want to have a lot of mineral spirits. You don't want to have a lot of paint. So, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of, I've already mixed it. So some of this paint down here, with just a little bit of this. I'm trying to create like this sort of blue purple. And it's good to mix things like right next so that you can compare, because you really need to compare values right next to each other. And I want you to also see how my brush is not perfectly smoothed out. You see how it has like little like teeth? And that's the fun part. I wouldn't want my brush to be so smooth. So then I just create, you see how you can create this sort of scraggliness, and that's perfect for onions. In fact, even a bigger brush might be good, like a fan brush, right? So you see how I kind of create this sort of blue, and I make it so that this is more of like a base, a home base of highlight. so that I'll put my middle highlight on top of this, but it has to be bigger than the middle. I can't just do a tiny stroke and then another tiny stroke. I have to do like this sort of bigger like color underneath. And then I could go down to a middle brush. I'll go down to a middle brush. And so now that I have sort of this blue, then I don't want to do just blue in this white. What I'm going to do, and this is the part of the lesson, is that because I had this sort of cool red, now I'm going to go to this warmer red so that I have warm and cool, but they're very similar. It's like, I think our eyes will understand it, but instead of me mixing it, I think sometimes when we'll mix these colors, it could go too gray. But if it's right out of the tube, then it's just yummy. It's just yummy. So you see how I'm mixing this right next to each other? So now, with a very light touch and very dry paint, see how I might just kind of go like this right on top. So now I have like that blue next to that kind of pink, and I'm getting a little bit lighter as I go. And so now I'm going to clean out my brush just a tiny bit. Make sure that all moisture, because remember, I want the strokes to lie on top of each other like frosting. So now on top of that, I might mix a little bit of this like gray. So I've gone cool, warm, I might go cool again. So now I'm going to use this gray with this. So you see how it's gone lighter than that, then lighter than that, then lighter than that. So I'm kind of seesawing, or I'm going back and forth between warm and cool, but then I'm going lighter as I get to my various lights. So now, because it's scraggly, I can go right on top. So then you still see everything. You still see the warm, the cool, the warm, and like sometimes too, if you want to sharpen, you can kind of sharpen. You can kind of sharpen it a little bit, just bringing up that edge. And then what I would probably do is wait. Wait until this is dry, just like I showed you that other painting. Now, on the sharpest highlight of the sharpest onion, I might even use a little bit of palette knife. Because when you use palette knife, it creates that sheen. And then I might even, like say on a halftone, I might, when it's dry, take a very, very pure red, right? Something that's just a little bit shocking, and maybe just put it like that's not shocking. Try and get a little more shocking, is that you want to use these colors right out of the tube, because you want to, whenever you do things like in a halftone or something, you want things to be very, very pure, because that's
Susan, can you hold those paint tubes up again?
okay.
We're getting lots of questions on the color, and I've got one of the violets in. So you've got
So permanent red violet and quinacridone rose.
macadamia.
They're very similar when you put them right out of the tube. But that's why you have to go transparent. And that's why you have to add a little bit of white, because to be honest, they're so similar, just a little bit bluer and a little bit redder. And you can play with these back and forth right on top of each other. And so these are just the two colors. I thought you don't need much more to paint this red onion. And I was just using that little bit of that cool gray and a little bit of ultramarine just for the background. But the thing is, you see how, because I carved in, now I have a little bit of this purple this is really, this is not a perfect onion, but it's just to show you techniques that you can get. And just how a bristle brush will create a little bit more. Like I could show you, so like say I was to carve in like the background of the bristle brush, I have the bristle one. So it's just going to be a little bit scratchier. You see how it's just a scratchier? The synthetic, you can get a sharper edge. I personally, sometimes I love the scratchiness of these sort of bristles, because they create this dance that sometimes you can't get with a synthetic. Now, you can't get a sheen with the bristle. So that's why they kind of play nicely together. But if you want to block in a whole still life with a bristle, right? And then go back in with a synthetic to create some of these, what you might call satiny or sheen kind of strokes on top, or the opposite. Like maybe you block in your whole painting with a synthetic, and so everything is kind of smooth and masked in, and then only on with a bristle, you kind of make those juicy strokes. So, you know, it's just the fact that you have texture, that you have a little bit of both. So just trying to like kind of get you guys excited about not only working with synthetic and bristle, but then only thinking about working with like a cool and a warm red right on top of each other and layering the highlights. You know, you just don't add white, you lay them, you put warm on top of a cool on top of a warm. And as your highlights at first they start out really big and then middle and then small, and you're able to see all of them. It's like a soup, right? You don't want to like, well, it's not a soup, it's a stew. You want to be able to taste every, you know, piece of the stew. You don't want it to all be blended together. So yeah, it's just a little bit more messy when you do a bristle, but sometimes that's cool because you don't want it to be so, let's say princessy or kind of smoothed out, but yeah, buy these colors, man. I've been like really loving these like strong pinks. And I've also been loving, I've also just been loving like the acidy greens. So like acid yellow green against these like beautiful cool pinks is so pretty.
I've been using a lot of those because you've introduced me to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, sometimes we as portrait artists, we get kind of stuck in the same old, same old. And so I was like, I showed you a couple of my very neutral kind of brown portraits. So with a bristle, you see how it's just a little, you know, kind of the bigger highlight underneath. And then the warmer, using the warmer red. But then as you get smaller, you get lighter. And then the smallest. And so it's actually nice to not go, sometimes it's nice not to go smaller and smaller. I love having my highlights be really bold. And then only with the onions that you want to zero in on, that's when you might go in and add a few more colors or add a little bit of palette knife or add a beautiful accent underneath. Okay, I hope this helps a lot. I hope this helps a little bit.
It was fantastic. I loved it. Not only the color, but the brush information I think is super helpful. I really enjoyed how
The onions look ridiculous.
it's like you're really exploiting the quality of the brush to your
That's it.
advantage. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, you know, it's sort of like just whenever you practice, try it with both brushes, and I know you're going to see a difference. I just know it, and you'll probably awaken something. You'll go, I've never even tried that brush before. Okay, look at how fun this is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. It was really fun. And the colors, thank you for sharing those with us. Lots of excitement about the colors. So I wanted to clarify those. So thanks for helping with that. Let me get you a couple questions. Oh, I lost your sound again.
Well, because you were away from that microphone.
So many things to remember.
There we go. There we go.
Oh, you know why? Because I think Scott turned the camera off or
No, I
something.
didn't.
Oh, we don't know what we're doing,
You
Jeff.
walked away from your.
Oh, I walked away. See, we have microphones over there. And so I walked away. So I'm 20 feet away from those microphones now.
I love it. It's the best thing about live,
I know,
shows,
I
right?
Now we know we have to figure out a new way to keep our cord plugged in.
Just a lot more tape.
It's a lot more tape.
Oh man. Well, let me get you some of the questions here because we got a bunch of mostly just lots of kudos. People really excited, and thank you for
Oh my
sharing
God.
that information. Just really wonderful things. One question is there a color that you prefer to create your undertone, to tone out your canvas?
Well, and that's the thing about still lifes. Let's just say for right now, as I do these still lifes, I would want my tone to be very neutral, very light, meaning the value not to be darker than like a 2 at 3 at most, because of the mere reason of why I was saying that I love those transparent colors, because no matter what's on the canvas, it's going to affect. And I want that purity of that purple to be, I want it to be as clean as possible, you know? And so that's why I haven't been toning my still lifes. Now, for a portrait, I mean, I think that it just depends if you want to do a harmony. But I mean, if you're wanting to do like a traditional, then yeah, a neutral gray. And to be honest, that cold or warm gray that Rembrandt has, I will tone my canvases completely with that. And just no white, just right out of the tube. And you can decide how opaque you want it. So you can be kind of thin and scratchy and use a big fan brush and kind of see some like, you know, fingerly threads through it and let it dry. Or you can be pretty solid, like that second one I did of the girl. It was totally a solid gray.
Right.
And so that's all, you know, but I mean, for portraits, I do think a neutral gray, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And they are such wonderful grays, both the cool and the warm gray. Super fun to use. Yeah. Here's a question from Michelle Byrne. Hi, Michelle. She wants to know about the models. So when you're in other countries like Tibet or Africa, do you have to get permission? Do you get permission? I mean, is there any process you go for that?
Well, when you're in a market scene, it is totally a-okay, totally legal to be able to take photographs. You know, it's just, I mean, I actually remember even talking to our guide and stuff in Tanzania. But yeah, it's totally like, you know, tourism. You know, of course there's protocol, like don't get too close, don't annoy
Right.
people. And especially for markets, you can take as many photos if you want. Now, if we're just walking down the street and we see people, and if we ask them, you know, can we take your photo? Then we always give some money. But you know, you don't have a model release form. You know, you don't carry those around to like get it because there's really no legality that can happen, you know. But so when it's one-on-one, we will pay something, and pretty much Scott is the type of person that is always willing to give every single photo we take to every model we do. So many times, like when we were in Guatemala with Kathy Anderson, and we were hiring models in like Atitlan, and some spoke English and some didn't. But the ones who didn't, no matter what, we would get someone who spoke English, I mean, spoke their language, to talk to them and say, okay, we're going to pay you this much. And do you have a way? Does someone in your family have a computer or any way that we can give you all these photos? And so we were always just giving every single photo we gave to people. And even before we were able to do that, Scott would get his photos developed. You know, in the old days when you have to develop photos. And vividly, when we were in Nepal one time, he got them developed at a local 1 hour photo place in Kathmandu. And like we would go around and hand them out to people. You know,
No,
and then days later, Scott said he would see people with their photos like in their little pockets. And so, or I would carry Polaroid cameras, you
no,
know, and so even Africa, like a lot of times, yeah, you do want to give back, you know, you want to like say, okay, not only is here some money, but like we'll offer photos to you, but like they might not have computers. So I would take Polaroids and I would be just taking Polaroids of everybody and giving them out to people.
that's super cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's really not only generous, but I think
Oh my gosh, no,
respectful. Yeah,
nothing.
very respectful. Yeah, fantastic. Some more questions here. Let me see. Oh, so do you ever create a texture when you're gessoing, or is all that painted on after?
Scott loves doing that. I've never been one like that, but I'm not saying that I wouldn't. In fact, with still lifes and stuff, that could be in my future. But Scott loves to create textures. He will do it with his gesso. He'll do it with like just doing abstract acrylic. Also, what he'll do is he'll literally scrape down his palette because he uses so much paint. He will like create tons of grays and just, you know, scraping your palette and just putting things in piles. And he will just kind of mass those on top of a canvas and create different abstractions and just let it dry. And so he'll have canvases in his studio of all these different sort of tones of just like, you know, grays and pinks and, you know, strong greens and blues, because that maybe those are scrapings from his palette, either acrylic or oil. Um, but yeah, he has done that where he's even added things sometimes, like gel mediums, right? To where you try and create textures. Yeah.
Fantastic. What color is the gray? I put that in there. So Lynn, take a look at that. I did. It's the cold gray 717. And I think
And
the warm
ultramarine
gray
blue. I had a
718.
little,
Little ultramarine blue in there. Perfect. Super helpful. Everybody's great comments about how
well,
helpful.
I'm so embarrassed. My camera and my stupid onions, but
Don't be. I think it's a
okay,
wonderful.
it was a brush demo. It wasn't an onion demo. I
Oh,
have performance anxiety. My onions were perfect.
no, this has been fantastic, really.
But
And
it's
that kind of
all
comes
about
down
just
to questions. Yeah.
getting people to like try new things and yeah. And just I guess one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is use the paint right out of the tube, paint through the whole object without trying to model it in the beginning. And then carve and then just put a few like accents and then just also think about making highlights like use the biggest brush and like vary between warm and cool, and go lighter as you get, as you get to the like the strongest highlight.
No, very easy to follow too. You're really good. You're really good at the
Okay.
demo. You
Okay.
got it down. All right. Well, that's it. Any upcoming events, workshops, things you
Yeah.
okay?
No, I would love to talk a little bit. I know anyone who's in Texas, Scott and I are going to San Antonio, and Scott's going to give a public demo at Heinz Fine Art on a Friday, April 25th. So anyone that wants can come and watch Scott paint. It's Friday evening, April 25th at Heinz Fine Art in San Antonio. And Scott and I will be both going to the Booth Academy in July. And that's a portrait, a 3-day. So I think July 16th through the 18th. And then also Jeff, I had talked to Jeff earlier, is I kind of connected you with workshops in South Africa. And so you said that like you guys can't really ship paint to them, but like you have these ambassadors, right? These people who work in these different countries. So Talita, and we're gonna go paint with her for a week in November. And so she's very excited to start working with Royal Talens and Rembrandt. And so for future workshops, I know that she's going to be having paint already available for her students, and you guys can order and have things sent there and maybe try out new colors and maybe, she's working with your whoever you have down there in South Africa. So I'm excited about that.
No, it's great. It's one of the benefits of being part of a global family, right? There are
Yeah,
affiliate outlets
sure.
around
Have the
the
paint be
world.
there already. I mean, that's just wonderful. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for, extending the invite too.
Oh
It's
my God,
you
she's so
guys.
excited. People there, they don't get the same kind of education, right? So I think it'll be really wonderful for her to be able to introduce her friends and all the people who come to her workshops to like be able to have great paint there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing all that. And of course, you can go on Susan and Scott's website to learn more about upcoming events as well. So make sure you check that out. And then for us, our next show is in 2 weeks, April 16th, and Michelle Byrne, who was on the show here watching today. So
Hey,
Michelle, we're excited to have you for our next one, April 16th. I will announce the time and it'll come out as a Facebook event, but it'll be here on YouTube again. But before I go, I have to announce the winner, right, of the paint set, and it's Catherine Bast. Catherine, you are today's winner, so just DM me at Royal Talens NA, and we'll get you set up with your free set of Rembrandt oil paints.
oh my God, just for watching?
Just for watching.
Wow.
Just for watching live and making a comment. And of course, we got lots of love for Rembrandt out there. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much, Susan and
Bye,
Scott,
everybody.
for being with us today. This was awesome. And